Today, we're going to get into a story that sits right at this really intense intersection of infrastructure collapse, climate trauma, and, amazingly, grassroots innovation.
Yeah, the source material we have is really compelling. We're looking at pitch decks, press releases, all sorts of notes about the organizing collective behind a documentary series called A Water Trail, Birth of a Water Protector.
And our mission today is to, go beyond just the emotional story and really pull out the actionable blueprints.
Exactly. We want to understand how one woman's personal trauma fleeing one crisis only to be slammed by another actually fueled the creation of this massive social justice collective.
And how they used a really unique organizing model and some incredible tech to solve a huge problem.
Right. We're going to be touching on some heavy themes the sources identify, things like environmental racism, water sovereignty, grassroots organizing, and even using art as a form of healing.
And the story of Amber Hassan, a mother at the center of all this, is just, it's the core of everything.
It really is. And the journey starts in a place where, institutional failure is just so raw. Flint, Michigan.
A name we all know, but the sources are very clear. The crisis is not over.
Not at all. The fight against the systemic denial of a basic human right, clean water, it's ongoing. And this is really the bedrock of what environmental racism looks like. It's when government neglect just happens to hit communities of color the hardest.
And that neglect is what Amber Hassan was living.
Yeah.
The document shows she actually moved away from Flint. She had to.
She was seeking refuge. She took her family to Puerto Rico to get away from the poisoned pipes, just to find some peace.
You just have to imagine the emotional weight of that, having to abandon your home just to keep your family safe and healthy.
Absolutely. But then the trauma just compounds. She had to go back to Flint for a project, briefly, and while she was gone.
Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico.
Yeah, and this wasn't just a storm. It was a total collapse of communication, of society, in the very place she'd gone to for safety.
I just can't get my head around that.
Yeah.
You're dealing with the horror of this massive climate disaster from a distance, but you're also completely cut off from your youngest child. Just agonizing.
And that dual experience, that's the key. You have the man-made crisis in Flint, the poisoned water, and then this catastrophic climate displacement in Puerto Rico. That became her breaking point.
But also her turning point.
Her point of radical transformation. The film's logline really nails this. Her individual suffering turned directly into a kind of commitment to collective defense. She realized the fight for survival, for dignity, it's the same fight everywhere.
Whether it's lead pipes in Michigan or a hurricane in the Caribbean.
Exactly.
And what's really interesting is how the sources frame this resilience. They specifically mention the target audience includes feminist and women's advocacy groups. It seems to anchor the whole movement in this idea of maternal purpose, that, that fierce drive to protect your children when the system won't. So how did that create the sister tour?
Well, she and her co-founder, Shay Cobb, who goes by the artist name FireSys, they realized that just being an advocate wasn't enough. They needed a container for both healing and for action.
So the sister tour was born.
That's it. They define it as an arts and healing collective that is rooted in resistance.
So their first solution wasn't a policy paper or a protest. It was something creative.
Yeah.
Spiritual.
Precisely. It was about amplification, giving a voice to women, especially women of color, through art, through collective economics, and just real community engagement.
They created safe spaces for storytelling, for performance.
Yeah, they understood that when you have institutional trauma, you need something like institutionalized healing to counter it.
It's easy to get focused on the poetry and the performance side, but our notes show a deep focus on economic empowerment too. I saw a mention of a specialty Congolese coffee line.
That detail is so important. It shows their model of what you could call regenerative economics. The money from the coffee sales funds humanitarian projects in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the art builds the story, the collective organizes the business, and the business generates money that supports justice in Flint and globally.
So solidarity isn't just a slogan for them.
No, it's a business model. But let's bring it back to the water crisis. You have this arts and healing collective. How does that actually get clean water to people in an emergency?
Right. How do you bridge that gap between, say, staging a poetry slam and running a massive logistics operation?
And that is the core of it. They couldn't wait for the government. They couldn't wait for policy. They used the trust and the network they had already built through their art.
So they had credibility that, say, a government agency just didn't have at that point.
Exactly. And the results are just staggering. The docs say that in just 56 days, 56. The sister tour distributed over 20,000 gallons of clean water.
Wow. That is a massive achievement.
It is. For a collective that started with art, it just proves that a shared purpose, one that's built through storytelling, can pivot into a real-world operational force very, very quickly.
And that success, that's what led them to create something more formal, right?
Yes, they realized they had sort of stumbled onto this incredibly effective, repeatable framework, and they distilled it down into what they call the A.N.T model of community organizing.
Okay, the A.N.T model. Let's break this down. If the sister tour was the initial spark, this model sounds like the engine that makes the whole thing scalable.
It is. The whole metaphor is an ant colony, how they thrive through collaboration. So it starts with accessible tools.
Meaning you use what you have.
You got it. It means you stop waiting for some big grant or fancy technology. You look around, you use the community center down the street, you use free social media, you use a simple text chain. It's about being resourceful, not rich.
Resourcefulness over extravagance. I like that. So then N is for network. And this is more than just a contact list, I'm guessing.
Oh, much more. It's about building a really robust, resilient system for communication and support. Information has to flow. Efforts have to be coordinated.
So it's an organic system built on trust.
Right, and that's what let them pivot so fast. When they needed water moved, that network instantly knew who had a truck, who could do the heavy lifting, and, crucially, who could identify the most vulnerable households that needed it first.
And that brings us to P talents. This feels like where their arts background really comes into play.
It's the heart of the model. It's this idea that every single skill in the community is valuable, not just the people who are good at, public speaking.
Right.
Maybe someone is a powerful spoken word artist. That person builds the narrative, raises morale. Someone else might be amazing with spreadsheets. They run logistics. Another person is just a great caregiver. They provide the psychological support. The A.N.T model takes all those individual talents and makes them collective power.
I get it now. That structure explains how they could collaborate with someone like the photojournalist LaToya Ruby Frazier.
Yes. They saw her talent for visual storytelling as a critical, accessible tool to amplify their network.
And they're teaching this, right? The sources mention a 5-day workshop curriculum they've developed.
They have. They've taken it to places like the Interlochen Center for the Arts. This proves it's not just a one-off reaction to Flint. It's a replicable, high-level blueprint for organizing against any kind of systemic failure, really.
So if the A.N.T model is the organizational blueprint, their partnership with Moses West is the technological blueprint. Let's talk about these atmospheric water generators.
The AWG. This is a complete game changer. It lets them bypass the poisoned infrastructure entirely.
How does it work?
It's a machine that literally pulls moisture from the air and condenses it into clean, safe, drinkable water.
And that's so important for this idea of water sovereignty, right?
Yeah.
It's about taking back control.
100%. The government failed the people of Flint. The pipes were poisoned. Water sovereignty means the community controls its own water source. The AWG does that. It takes the old, failed system completely out of the equation.
You don't have to trust the pipes anymore.
You don't have to trust anyone but your own community. You're generating your own clean water right there.
So what was the actual impact in Flint? How much water are we talking about?
The unit Moses West brought in could generate over 3,000 gallons a day. And the water quality, according to the Moses West Foundation, exceeds EPA and WHO standards. It's often powered by green energy, too. So it's not just a fix. It's a sustainable, reliable, decentralized solution.
Which leads directly to the call to action in the full A Water Trail documentary series. It's not just about relief.
No, it's about permanence. The full series pushes for establishing community-controlled water sovereignty hubs.
So permanent installations of these AWGs.
Exactly. Powered by AWGs, managed and operated by local people using the A.N.T model. It's the ultimate statement. It says, we're not waiting for you to fix your broken system. We're building our own.
And for you listening, it's worth noting, this first film, Birth of a Water Protector, is a 33-minute short. It's just episode 1 of a planned 7-part series. This is a serious long-term project.
It is. And the director, Tukler, is from Flint. He's a multidisciplinary artist whose work has always been about confronting systemic oppression. So the goal here isn't just to document the pain, it's to distribute the blueprint, the A.N.T model, so other communities can learn how to fight back.
So when we take a step back, the whole story arc is just phenomenal. It starts with one person's compounded trauma, the infrastructure betrayal in Flint, the climate disaster in Puerto Rico.
And that trauma becomes the collective power of the sister tour.
Then that collective power gets formalized into a real strategy, the A.N.T model.
Accessible tools, network, talents, and they use that strategy to implement this game-changing technology, the AWG, to achieve not just immediate relief, but a path to permanent water sovereignty.
They didn't just protest. They became the emergency response and the new infrastructure.
The takeaway is just so clear. When the big institutions fail, the answer isn't always another top-down fix. Sometimes it's a powerful, creative, bottom-up collective. And this really brings up a question for you, the listener, one that goes way beyond water. The A&T model was born from this crisis, right? But its principles, accessible tools, network, and talents, they're universal. So when you look at the big systemic challenges that feel overwhelming in your own community or your workplace or even your own life, what are the tools you already have?
What networks are you not using to their full potential?
And how can you take your unique individual talents and turn them into a source of collective power?
That's a framework you can literally start thinking about today. Whether the fight is for clean air or better schools or just more accountability from local leaders, the blueprint that Amber Hassan and the Sister Tour created is just. It's proof that resourcefulness and resilience are the most powerful forces for change there are. We really encourage you to look more into this idea of water sovereignty and the power of the A&T model.
And now let's get to Flint, where the drinking water is still tainted with lead.